Greetings, everybody. It is Armor of Truth Live number 203. And this is going to be a short update for you today. There's so many weird things happening that we couldn't leave it alone. We'll be away for just a few days, so we wanted to make sure that you heard all of this weirdness. Let's start out with this. Of course, our context for today is going to be the Russia-Ukraine war and what's going on there. Who's actually fighting? Who's on the ground fighting? Who is it? It's the Ukrainians and the Russians, right? It's the Russia-Ukraine war. Surely those are the two forces fighting one another. Well, not so fast. As you see this meme found earlier today, they lied to us about Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, WMD, Vietnam, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras, Haiti, Cuba, Panama, Nicaragua. But surely they're telling the truth about Ukraine, right? We'll start today with a clip. Colonel Douglas McGregor. This is from the Redacted show with Clayton Morris, former Fox News reporter. So let's listen to what the colonel has to say about what's going on the ground there in Ukraine.
As you point out, most of Ukrainians' best forces are gone. They've been killed or wounded. Ukrainians have lost roughly 100,000 dead, perhaps 2, 3, even 400,000 wounded.
Wow.
They started out with an army of 600,000. Remember, we spent 8 years building this army up with the express purpose of attacking Russia. That's what it was designed to do. That's why the Russians attacked it.
We built it up. Did you hear that? We built it up. That's what we built that army up. Hundreds of al-Qaeda militants arrive in Ukraine from Syria. This is from back in March. From thecradle.co, around 450 militants from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, it's known as the HTS, armed group, militants, a rebranded Jabhat al-Nusra. It's the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. Let's just get down to brass tacks. The Syrian branch of al-Qaeda arrived in Ukraine on March the 8th to fight against the Russian army. It's been said that one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. But what is a terrorist? How do we define the term? Is it possible that the United States engages in terrorism? Has been for many years? Dare we even speak that way? Perhaps even within its own borders and upon its own citizens. Well, we've already seen that. We talked about that last night, didn't we? Tuskegee. That Tuskegee affair, the syphilis experiment, and how many other experiments that have gone on that we don't know about. But then there are things like we just can't really talk about here on this platform. But we can on other platforms. But let's be honest about it. State-funded domestic terrorism has been a regular event in the United States since at least 1995. Oklahoma City, that's all I can say here. We'll even talk about Blackwater, now operates under the name Constellus, and American private military companies that provide contract security service to the United States federal government. We'll talk about that another time on another platform, so stay tuned. But that is the proper context for discussing private military groups like the Wagner Group, which is a Russian private military company, the Mozart Group, which is an American military volunteer group in Ukraine. The Wagner Group is widely believed to be owned or financed by Yevgeny Prigozhin, a businessman with close links to Putin. It's speculated that the Wagner Group is used by the Russian government to allow, check this out, to allow for plausible deniability in certain conflicts, which means essentially just to obscure the number of casualties and financial costs of whatever the regime is using the Russian military for, just to keep it from the public. The Mozart Group is a group of Western military volunteers founded by retired U.S. Marine Corps Colonel Andrew Milburn. This group is now active in the Russia-Ukraine war for the purpose of reinforcing the Ukrainian military and territorial defense units, ostensibly so that Ukraine can defend itself from Russia. But that seems like it's not really what's going on there. The very security experts who spent the last 2 decades sounding the alarm over foreign fighters in the context of a global jihad are now lauding the commitment of non-state actors, military and civilian, from countries like the United States and the United Kingdom, who are willing to pick up arms for Ukraine. Right? Doesn't sound so crazy. Someone in the UK or someone in the United States is really passionate about that war, and they want to join it. They want to go be a part. But is that all? Is that really all it is? Just passionate people? I mean, they're going to pick up arms for Ukraine. So the explicit distinction here is that fighting for Ukraine is a just cause. Since 9/11, particularly, the global security community has virtually codified and used the term foreign fighters for terrorist individuals who left their home countries to wage jihad alongside Al-Qaeda and Islamic State in countries like Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Right. As long as it's happening in those nations, doesn't count. What about when it's happening in Europe? So, what about what's happening in Ukraine? What about when the Western hegemony is paying them? The ones that we've called Islamic extremists, jihadis, that are supposed to be the threat to us. That's what we've called them for years. Now we're employing them. Are you catching on? Foreign fighters, non-state actors, and jihadist groups are regularly used for geopolitical reasons. Right here you go. Zbigniew Brzezinski is an example of this. Especially in during the Cold War. Let me play another clip here. Now, this is going to be one of the hired hands. Check this out.
دا چې د خارجي کشورونو چې خلک راتل دا مې راوستل او دا کوم رس چې ما راټول کړل دي $15,000 €15,000 د المان او $600 او $800 $15,000 ټول راځي تقریبا د سپین یورو.
So that's one of those who was hired. So that gives you a little. Now this is available on Twitter. Is that real? Is that authentic? I don't know. What we're doing, though, is we're putting pins in the board. We're gathering data. And after a while, a true picture, begins to emerge. All right, now let's see I want to give you the clip describing exactly where Al-Qaeda came from in just a moment, because this is who's being funded to fight in Ukraine right now. American support to the Mujahideen against the Soviets in Afghanistan after 1979, or even today, Russia's own position on the Taliban after U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021 are some examples. What I'm suggesting to you here is that you've got the Western hegemony. You've got the United States and NATO. And they are hiring their own group of Islamic militants. And you've got Putin and his Wagner group and his private military organizations. They're also hiring their own group of Islamic militants. Fighters. So on the ground in Ukraine, we've got Islamic militants fighting for both sides. What's going on in it? What's really going on over there? War has always been big business. In a global, multipolar world order where massive non-governmental organizations, World Economic Forum, for example, and enormous private corporations currently have control of the levers of power. Things are not always what they seem, or as reported by the Western mainstream media and most of the so-called alternative media. You have to dig today to get to the truth. And in the context of defining terrorism, scholars Chris Mazzaroli and Dan Byman argue that even the lists compiled by democratic governments are more likely to include some terrorist groups, but not others. So it's, depends on whether they're useful for us this week or not, how we classify them. All right. So let's look at here's the piece from, let's see, where is that? Yeah, from the Cradle. Now this is Almayadeen. Yeah, here it is, just from the Cradle. Hundreds of al-Qaeda militants arrive this is back in March, 450 of them. And the way they're getting there is they're coming through Turkey. Turkey is allied, loosely, I guess, with Ukraine. And they're saying that these fighters, they're coming from Syria, can't go directly into Ukraine. That would be a little too obvious. So they're taking them into Ukraine or into Turkey, and then from Turkey taking them on into Ukraine. Foreign mercenaries from around the globe, from all over the place. Reportedly, senior leaders of Turkestan Islamic Party groups and the nation of Turkey have coordinated the movement of militant Islamic extremists into Ukraine by way of Turkey. Sources say that most of the militants moving into Ukraine are veterans of the U.S.-backed proxy war for regime change in Syria. So these are not rookies. These are grizzled, hardened, dog-faced warriors. They know what they're doing, apparently. And the income for these Syrian fighters is reported to be around $1,200 to $1,500, and now they're being paid by NATO. That's your tax dollars at work. Russian intelligence services warned on March 4th that the United States was sending extremist militants to Ukraine to fight against Russia. Moscow has now accused Washington of training these extremist militants at the U.S. Al-Tanf military base in southeastern Syria. So the two sides have been negotiating in Belarus to address points that could potentially lead to a ceasefire agreement. Now, here's the next point we're going to make for you. The United States is not interested in negotiating a ceasefire. Ukraine might be, the people there might be, but that chess piece, we're not done with that yet. Just listen to this. First of all, let's look at some of the evidence here. Daniel Dumbrill was reporting on this recently. As a matter of fact, Al-Qaeda's official communication channels have even recently started posting and celebrating Russian losses. Once again, we have Zbigniew Brzezinski. Let's play this clip for you. So this will explain for you who Brzezinski is and how did the players, the pieces, get set up for the way the chessboard looks today. Here is an important part of it.
Brzezinski was the strategist for Jimmy Carter and convinced Jimmy Carter to say, look, the Russians are dominating Afghanistan with a civilian secular government. Let's create a new organization. Let's create Al-Qaeda. Let's back Osama bin Laden and give his supporters weapons to begin fighting the Russians, and we can pull a coup.
You hear that? Is that taboo? Can you say that now? Has it been long enough where we can say OBL? We could say his name and openly declare, yes, of course he was on the payroll. He's on the CIA payroll. No question about it.
D'etat there, and the Russians will fight back, and then we'll say the Russians invaded. And it worked. Saudi Arabia made a deal with America that they would push the Wahhabi extremists, the Al-Qaeda, the most right-wing wing of the Islamic parties, and it worked. Essentially, Al-Qaeda is a contract army for the United States.
All right, well, this is another clip I have for you coming up in a moment. But let's move on for now. Here are the articles where we pulled this information from. Interesting story, folks. What's actually going on out there. Okay, next up, by the way, welcome to Armor of Truth Live what number are we on now? 203. Coming up later, we're going to talk about Alex Jones. Just a few minutes, we'll talk about Alex Jones. We're going to talk about a psychic who has predicted nuclear war. What we want to do before we get there, though, let's see, what's the other clip? Here's the other clip I had for you concerning the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Look, they don't want to shut this down. It looks like, for all intents and purposes, that they want this to go on as long as it possibly can. I'll check my notes here to make sure we're on track. Yeah, just not interested. Listen to this piece. Listen to the rhetoric here.
What did you make of Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's comments about...
She's asking him, essentially, what do you make of the Russian Foreign Minister's overtures to peace talks or ceasefire talks? Are you interested in talking with them?
That Moscow is open to talks with the West on Ukraine, but is yet to receive any serious proposal to negotiate. What do you make of that? What do you make of the timing?
The timing is notable, and the timing is notable because this statement came within hours of a barrage of Russian missiles that targeted the capital city, targeted other Ukrainian towns and cities, struck playgrounds and schools and apartment buildings. So you have to take that context into account. We see this as posturing. We do not see this as a legitimate offer to engage in the dialogue and diplomacy that is absolutely necessary.
Okay, so what he's basically saying there, folks, is, well, you know, he's going to draw a reference to, of course, they've bombed playgrounds and they've bombed civilians. You have to keep that rhetoric up to justify why you're there, why it's going on so long. We just have to stay there and defend the defenseless. Once again, folks, let's ask ourselves, are they telling the truth about Ukraine? How often have they told us the truth about these foreign affairs in the past? Let's see here. Vladimir Putin said this recently. I want to remind you that our country also has various means. We have ways of destruction more modern than those of NATO countries to protect Russia and our people. We will certainly use all the means at our disposal. Well, what is he talking about? He may have been referring to Russia's hypersonic missiles. They go 15 times faster than the speed of sound. That's hard to defend. They have stealthy submarines that operate quietly there, almost impossible to find. Or he could be talking about his modernized nukes. Putin also said, when the territorial integrity of our country is threatened, to protect Russia and our people, we will certainly use all means at our disposal. Biden said the other day that Putin is not joking about this. Somehow he knows. He's in Putin's head, maybe. about his potential use of tactical nuclear weapons or biological chemical weapons. Biden suggested that the reason for Putin's alleged willingness to risk a nuclear confrontation with the West is that his military is, you might say, significantly underperforming. Should we trust Joe Biden when he says that? I don't think so. I don't think we can trust anything that comes out of these clowns. Right? United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres used the term Armageddon recently. Back in September, when he called for the global dismantling of nuclear warheads to prevent a humanitarian Armageddon. Well, this is reminiscent also of what Biden has said recently. We've not faced the prospect of Armageddon since the Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. So he's caused some heat for using that reference, but I don't know. You tell me. What do you think's going on there? Here is a piece from Patrick Lancaster, who is a crowd-funded reporter on the ground, and he's reporting from behind Russian lines, reporting on what's going on over there. It's very interesting when you can get a completely different perspective than we're used to seeing here. Let's listen to the first couple minutes of Patrick Lancaster.
I'm Patrick Lancaster, and right now we are in Donetsk, in a crater purportedly made by a rocket fired from a HIMARS missile system that the United States gave to Ukraine. This is a civilian area that Ukraine has fired this foreign Western supplied ammunition on. Only a civilian area. We see the civilians here. We see the civilians that have been injured by this. They say, they know themselves that this was given to Ukraine by the United States and other Western countries that keep supplying Ukraine with ammunition to be used on civilians. This is what they have to say. This is not my opinions. The fact is, this is a civilian area. We're told by the residents there's absolutely no military base or anything like that near here. They say Ukraine is shelling and targeting the civilians here in this area. We're going to have a look around, talk to the locals, and show you exactly
Okay. So Patrick goes on to talk. Normally what he does is he talks to locals. He speaks the language and goes around and talks to the folks and gets reports from on the ground. Now, I know what some of you are saying. This doesn't look real. But, well, look, you can decide for yourself, right? You can watch Patrick Lancaster's work. You can decide for yourself. Once again, any one of these bits doesn't make a case. But when you put it all together, a picture starts to emerge. You begin to see what it is that's going on. Okay, there's that, right? We've got Islamic militants fighting one another on the ground there in Ukraine. That is strange, but that's the way it works today. That is how it works. That's what it looks like. And next, it seems like that the West, anyway, is only interested in continuing the bullets flying. And of course, now, we've seen this come out recently, that the U.S. just spent almost $300 million stocking up on medication. Now, this headline here was saying that anti-radiation pills to save life. That's not the case. What this is Nplate. It's a drug called Nplate, made by Amgen USA, and it treats acute radiation syndrome. Apparently, it's a liquid. Comes in an IV bag. And let's check this story for you. So, what are they doing? Why is it that our government is suddenly preparing, it seems like, to treat people? Specifically, what this is when you've been exposed to radiation, your whole body. What happens in radiation sickness is your blood can't circulate properly because the platelets become deformed. And so this stimulates production of new platelets and fights the life-threatening bleeding that comes from the radiation sickness. Why are they stocking up on this right now? Well, the Department of Health and Human Services said this is just part of an ongoing program. Okay. Should we take their word for that? The U.S. government is taking preparatory steps in the event diplomacy fails. Right, that's the headline. They're taking steps in the event diplomacy fails. There is no diplomacy. They're not trying to engage in talks. Folks, it looks like they want this to go on for as long as they can possibly make it go on. The only question is the rest of Europe going to be interested in backing this madness? Because they live right there. They're going to be most impacted by anything that might pop off over there. On Tuesday, the Department of Health and Human Services announced that it was purchasing a supply of the drug Nplate, which has been FDA-approved to treat blood cell injuries that accompany acute radiation syndrome in adults and children. Acute radiation syndrome occurs when a person's entire body is exposed to a high dose of penetrating radiation, the kind resulting from a nuclear explosion or a dirty bomb. This drug serves to reduce radiation-induced bleeding by stimulating the body's production of platelets. The drug can reportedly be used in both adults and children. Ukraine is similarly preparing in the event that nuclear weapons are used in the war. In the capital city of Kiev, they're readying evacuation centers and ensuring sufficient stock of potassium iodine pills are on hand. Such pills help protect against radiation absorption, specifically in your thyroid. So, there's that. According to the Federation of American Scientists, Russia has an estimated about 6,000 nuclear warheads, including about 1,600 deployed strategic nukes, about 2,800 in reserve, non-deployed nukes, and about 1,500 stockpiled retired nukes. The U.S., by way of comparison, has about 5,400 nuclear warheads. 1,600 of those are deployed strategic warheads. 100 are deployed non-strategic nukes. About 2,000 are reserve or non-deployed nukes, and 1,700 of them are retired. Washington Post reported that standard modern nuclear bombs have yields equivalent of 500,000 and 1 million tons of TNT. Otherwise, it's also known as 500 kilotons or 1 megaton. A megaton is equivalent to 1 million tons of TNT, dynamite. The nukes dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki had, by comparison, yields of 15 and 21. So we're talking about magnitudes larger. If you believe it. If you believe it. In the way of nuclear warheads dropped to date, Russia holds the record for the most powerful ever exploded in October of 1961. Right here. This is the Zorobamba. Dropped over Siberia. This particular bomb had a yield of 50 megatons. Still very small for comparison to what's available today. Low yield nukes.
Взрыв сопровождался световой вспышкой необычной силы.
He said, success. So-called low-yield nukes like those Kadyrov recommended Putin use to cover Russian retreats are still incredibly more powerful than the 2020 Beirut explosion, which injured over 7,000 and killed 218. So we're talking about this is a serious matter. And we're not getting the truth about it. Not only are we not getting the truth, they're not only hiding the truth, they're just telling us a lot of lies, right? About who's there fighting, about what the purposes are. It's difficult to know. It's difficult to know what's really going on there. Okay. Now let's move into another piece here. Remember, coming up in a few moments, we've got a psychic here who's predicted Gog and Magog, right? But it's also interesting that Raven Rock Mountain Complex, known as RRMC, is a highly restricted U.S. military installation complete with an underground nuclear bunker, often been referred to as the underground Pentagon. Let's see, here's the, got some pictures. There you go, it's an underground military base. A few more here. Yeah, there's some shots of Obama visiting back in the day. Now, the reason we're talking about this is they've recently expanded this operation. Let's reset that. Recently expanded this Raven Rock Site R. Located in Pennsylvania, originally built in the 1950s. It's part of a continuity of government plan, incorporating remotely located, hardened, and secured facilities that could be used to run military operations and even the entire country in the event of a national emergency such as a nuclear conflict. Garrett Graff, the journalist and author of the 2017 book Raven Rock, the story of the U.S. government's secret plan to save itself while the rest of us die, said, quote, "The Raven Rock is the place where the nuclear war in the United States would begin." He added, Raven Rock is this massive, hollowed-out mountain. It's a freestanding city with individual buildings, 3-story buildings built inside of this mountain. It has everything that a small city would. There's a fire department in there. There's a police department in there. There's medical facilities, dining halls. The dining facility serves 4 meals a day. It's a 24-hour facility, and it was sort of mothballed to a certain extent during the 1990s as the Cold War ended, and then was restarted in a hurry after September 11th and has been pretty dramatically expanded over the last 15 years. Today, it could hold as many as 5,000 people in the event of an emergency. The Raven Rock Mountain Complex received a $45 million government grant in 2018, and of course is still operational today and has recently seen some expansions. So put that in the board. There's another pin. We have some kind of a picture developing here. Here's a video you can watch if you like from Vice TV. I know. You can email us and tell us how much you trust Vice TV. Again, it's known as a continuity of government plan, and it's something that you would expect any responsible government to have. All right, but they've been expanding lately. It's just another point in our board as we research and as we try to figure out what's actually going on in the world. To recap, so far, all these scary people in the world that we've been told for years are our enemies, the Islamic militant jihadis. Well, now they're being paid with our tax dollars to fight the Russians in Ukraine. This is just like in the 70s when, as I showed you earlier, Zbigniew Brzezinski established, set up, formed Mujahideen, which is now that is Al Qaeda, and by extension ISIS, the Islamic State. All of them are proxy armies of the U.S. government, or of the Western hegemony, which means the United States and NATO. That's just what's going on, folks. And the government has just purchased $300 million worth of medications to treat acute radiation sickness. And they've ramped up the expansions of these underground bases and the continuity of government plan. Now, on away from that, as we bring it down the home stretch here, let me tell you here about, let me get into this psychic in just a moment. How about Alex? Poor Alex. What happened to Alex today? The families and their lawyers sat in a stunned silence as the court clerk read one by one the sums awarded to each of the 15 plaintiffs in the case. After court was adjourned, they hugged one another, quietly weeping. Almost $1 billion, jury in Connecticut has awarded to 8 families and an FBI agent as a result of the case, which shall not be named on this platform. It's the quickest way to get your channel. Lost in Neverland. But some of you who have followed this story know the name Robbie Parker. The largest award went to Robbie Parker, who received $120 million. The report here says from AP, the AP Wire says, for years on his InfoWars show and website, Mr. Jones singled out Mr. Parker, whose daughter Emily died at Sandy Hook, as an actor whose televised tribute to Emily a day after her death was, quote, disgusting. Mr. Parker, who has endured online abuse, harassment, and death threats since, formed the centerpiece of the Connecticut case. Every day, quote, every day in that courtroom we got up on the stand and we told the truth, Robbie Parker said. Telling the truth shouldn't be so hard and it shouldn't be so scary. It's an interesting story. We just can't say anything about it here. Mr. Parker added in a nod to Mr. Jones' followers, he said, quote, for anybody that still chooses to listen to that man, just ask yourself, what has he ever given you? Aside from the case at hand, or the facts of this case, I'm not as interested in the facts of this case as I am what kind of precedent this sets. Right? Alex Jones is going to be used as a symbol for anyone who speaks out, challenges the official narrative. And so this is a big message to everyone out there, all of us who, although I don't trust Jones either. He's not a reliable person. And what he's done essentially here in being so reckless, he's just given them perhaps he's been put in this position on purpose. It's difficult to know, but let's just assume that he's organic. What he has done is he has put us all in peril, and he's made it more difficult to research and talk about anything that challenges the official narrative. It's unlikely that he's going to pay all this. There are caps on what people can receive, but still, the message is clear. All right, the message is clear. All right, now before we get to our psychic story, here's another piece of good news. I want to thank my lovely wife, Summer, for this flood of information and research that she had provided for all of us today. I'm just the instrument, so I'm bringing it to you, but she has put this together, and here is one of those stories that is Interesting. This is a victory, a small victory, if you will. Maybe it's a big victory, right? The conservative Christian group 1 Million Moms has launched a petition urging Disney to cancel its FXX animated sitcom series Little Demon. The show features a mother who was impregnated by Satan and gives birth to an Antichrist daughter. Yeah, just Disney. Just an average Tuesday at Disney, right? The show, rated TV MA for mature audiences, features graphic violence. Now, this cartoon, they'll say, was intended for adults, but it's a cartoon. Look, mature men and women ought not be watching cartoons, right? We could be spending our time on something a little more edifying, but that's what they'll say. This wasn't intended for children anyway. That's really no argument as far as I'm concerned. 1 Million Moms, which has petitioned against other controversial shows, is urging parents to sign their latest petition calling for Disney to cancel Little Demon. According to Deadline, among other shenanigans, the comedy shows Laura, the mother, nude with no pixelation. She's a cartoon, but still nude. She strips down in the first episode to perform a ritual. You can see it on the top right of your screen there. That's not her nude, of course, but that's, one of the rituals. It looks like the banishing ritual of the pentagram or something like that. In the first episode, to perform a ritual, while there are multiple instances of nudity throughout the series. 13 years after being impregnated by Satan, a reluctant mother and her Antichrist daughter attempt to live an ordinary life, is how Disney describes the show. In the petition, 1 Million Moms quotes the series creator Seth Kirshner, who allegedly told reporters, "We're going to keep going for it until we're told no." Right? We're just going to make the most shocking content. We're going to try to debase the culture as much as we possibly can until somebody makes a stop. There's no sense of responsibility. You can see what they're up to. They have a plan. Quote, "Let's be sure they're told quickly," said 1 Million Moms. "We must do so because Disney is introducing viewers, including children who might stumble across this series, to a world of demons, witches, and sorcery. Along with the demonic content of this series, the minds of younger viewers will also be inundated with secular worldviews that reflect the current culture." Right. 1 Million Moms also warns that the previews and commercials include such horrific content that it's difficult for families who watch FX to avoid the evil subject matter completely. It just shows up in ads. It's evident that Disney is trying to portray witchcraft as a positive tool to fight evil. The first episode is more than enough for most Christian families to realize that Little Demon is an extremely dangerous series. The organization stresses in the petition, which was titled First Blood, this initial episode of the premiere season is currently streaming. 1 Million Moms concluded the petition by urging Disney to cancel this demonic show, Little Demon, immediately. And now it has been. So there's that. And now, finally, at long last, the living Nostradamus claims World War III will soon start. Why should we listen to him, right? Has he got anything right? A Brazilian prophet dubbed the modern-day Nostradamus has warned of an imminent nuclear war after a series of accurate predictions. A series of accurate predictions, they say. This is from Microsoft. This is from MSN.com, okay? So here's your source. Athos Salome claims that he foresaw COVID-19, claims that he foresaw the death of Queen Elizabeth II. She's in her 90s. How hard is it to foresee that? And even the numbers for Elon Musk's attempt to buy Twitter. The Daily Star reports the seer even claims he foresaw robots making humans out of work, even before the billionaire revealed his Optimus robots. But among the more ominous of the 36-year-old's claims is the chilling declaration that World War III has already started. Wow. Brilliant, huh? How hard is that? He claimed that this has been confirmed by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Okay, in an age of digital fantasy. Dismissing allegations of being nothing but a quack, Athos said, quote, "I don't consider myself a soothsayer. I don't believe it. I'm not sure what that even means, but he goes on to say, science has started to prove that my skills are real. A few months ago, my list of predictions and I went through technical analysis, and no tricks were proven. He's obviously a language barrier here, but he's trying to say that he's been authenticated somehow. At the age of 12, I realized that I was different from other people, as most 12-year-olds do, with more sensitivity to feel, hear, and talk about events that I had no control over. He said, I believe that I was chosen to help the people of this world. I believe that I only have sensitivity and a prophetic gift. I know how to understand people and what they're looking for, unquote. Athos said that in 2012, he predicted a global pandemic for the year 2020. And 44 days before Vladimir Putin sent tanks rolling into Ukraine, Athos announced it was inevitable. More cryptically, he posted on Instagram stating that a leader would be born between 22, 44, and or 66, whatever that means, and that he will take out part of those who are not in favor of his decision. So this is like Nostradamus, so vague that you could apply anything to it, really. Athos argues the numbers prophesied on Elon Musk's collapsed purchase of Twitter because he offered to buy it on April 22nd for $44 billion, in addition to his private jet allegedly worth $66 million. Folks, don't get into the numbers. Some folks that we've heard from recently who were unhappy with us for our stance on flat Earth were also telling us how Armor of Truth added up to a number that meant don't do it, folks. Let's talk about that another time. He says, on my list, it also said that Queen Elizabeth II would die and that in 2022, the Third World War would begin. He continued, he says the Third World War III. Is that World War IX? There's a barrier here. Anyway, it says it began when COVID became a pandemic in the world. It was confirmed after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and became reality after the super development of technology. So, aside from a little bit of a problem and things getting lost in translation there, I think we can safely say that once again what we have here is just another interesting individual saying things that anyone else could say, making vague statements that can be applied to anything. However, let's also be very careful because it is possible. It is possible for the father of lies, your adversary, Satan, to take over some person. For those who affirm this particular type of eschatology, the Bible states that there will be an Antichrist figure. Right? Now that's up for debate on exactly how that happens. There's there's a few different positions that are within the church, but it is certainly possible for Satan to use someone in such a way. But Satan doesn't know the future. The only thing about the future he knows is that he's defeated. That much he knows. The demons, that's as far as they know. So their time is short, and they'll do whatever they can to deceive God's people. But let's be honest about one thing, folks. Right? The devil is stronger than you, but he's not actually interested in you. Right? There's only one. There's only one Satan, and he's not omniscient. He's not omnipresent, as a lot of people might have you believe. He's not like God. He is a created being. He can only be in one place at one time. And we need to remember that as a Christian, we have three enemies: the flesh, the world, and the devil. And in my opinion, they come in that order. Your first enemy is your own flesh, right? Even if the devil didn't exist, your flesh would be enough to keep you in sin always. This is why we need a Savior. We're hemmed in on all angles, folks. You can't get through this on your own. You can't figure this out by yourself. There's no way for you to save yourself, to put your broken image right with God. So Jesus Christ, which is God, God-man, fully God, fully man, came into the world and lived a perfect life. He was born outside of sin. He was born not of an earthly father, not of ordinary generation, which means he was not born in sin like the rest of us. And he kept his record clean throughout his life. Lived this perfect life, taught the doctrine that we find in the Scripture, and went to the cross willingly, fully man, experiencing every bit of it. Gave his life willingly, and then took it up again of his own will in victory over sin and death. That is your answer. That is your only way, right, to overcome death, sin, and to have eternal life in a new creation, in a glorified body with God. So if you're wondering about that today and you're feeling the call, and these words, this is the gospel, if these words mean something to you, and you know they're important, and you feel the urge to respond, understand that that's God drawing you. He's calling you. And once he calls you, you can respond. Respond to him now. Call out to Christ today and right now. That is the answer to things like this. And all of this, it's a strange world, folks, and things are getting stranger by the day. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again next week, Lord willing, for Armor of Truth Live number 204. We'll see you next time.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
Good luck.